Hello and welcome to Busy Webinar. Today we have Erin Swanson of ES Swanson Law on the line with us as well. And Erin is actually presenting in person. If you've not been to the BizzyWeb headquarters yet in person, we would encourage you to please do so. We usually, if you're nice enough to us and if you tip us heavily, we'll provide lunch for you if you join us in our headquarters in Champlin. But Erin, again, thank you for joining us today on Can Spam.
Thanks for inviting me, Dave.
Absolutely. We're going to switch back and forth on a couple of things, of course, but wanted to present a few slides just to give everybody an idea of what they've got coming, and then we'll jump over to your slides and actually introduce folks to you. As a reminder to everyone, as you go in, if you're viewing this on the webinar inside of our website, please go ahead and click on the window to join us live on the Hangout. And actually, I'm going to start up a new window here so that everyone can see what I'm talking about. So if you go to google.com/plus-BizzyWeb, that'll actually take you right into, actually let's go google.com/plus-BizzyWeb, and then you'll be able to see that there's a event live on the Hangout right here. And so if you click on this, it goes into Q&A and live. As long as you're logged into Google+, you'll be able to ask us questions that we'll be able to answer in turn during the event. I know we have like 14 people registered for today, and hopefully everyone's going to be able to join us. If you haven't logged in yet to view, it would be a great idea for you to do that so that you can ask questions. Erin's got a lot of information about how to send your emails safely, effectively, and stay on the right side of the iron grid with the Can Spam Act. So be sure to click on this Q&A button, join us live on the Hangout, and let's get right to it. Again, I am Dave Meyer with BizzyWeb, and at BizzyWeb we do a lot of fun stuff, but the big thing that we do is online marketing. So we build websites that are fantastic and that are designed to seamlessly integrate with social media, to be fully search engine optimized, and to integrate with pay-per-click advertising or search engine optimization as necessary. If you need to get everything up and online, BizzyWeb's the place to talk. So give us a call, and our contact information is down at the bottom of this slide. What that can also look like is social media setup, so you can see some examples of well-designed, of course we think so, online marketing. This is LinkedIn, Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. Actually, I mixed up Facebook and Google+, but as we look at these, that's an example of what you can do. And if you haven't looked at your Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn page in the past 4 or 5 months, now is the time to do so because all of the designs have changed. So take a look at that, and we actually have busy webinars on how to effectively update those. Check out our page at buzzyweb.com/bb, or you can go to buzzyweb.com/events to scroll back through the past in our events and to see what's been happening and review those articles. Without further ado, though, I'd like to get you to our headliner today. And our headliner, of course, is Erin Swanson with ES Swanson Law. Erin is our corporate attorney and has saved our bacon on a number of occasions. Generate Buzz Without Getting Stung, you'll now notice, has a little register mark next to it. That's directly as a result of Erin, and it did take a fair amount of heavy lifting, so I'm so glad that we had Erin to rely on to make that happen for us. But anything that happens with any regard to legality, we run it by Erin, and she's, again, a brilliant resource, and you need to talk to her. If you don't have an attorney, or if your attorney stinks, you need to talk to Erin. So,
thanks, Dave.
Yes, absolutely. So let me escape out of this one and switch slideshows, go into Erin's deck, and Erin, just give me a nod when you're ready for the next slide.
All right, thank you, Dave. Thanks for the introduction. So today I thought I'd get started trying to make somewhat boring topic a little bit exciting. So of course I started with a comic. And this is from The Oatmeal, which is an online comic that I personally enjoy. And you'll see a number of sample spams in a digital mailbox, with the note that spam was outlawed in 2003. And then when we do a comparison to the physical mailbox, the whole point is that your physical mailbox is still going to be overflowing with spam because in 237 years there's been no regulation on spam mail. But today we're going to focus on the digital kind. So online casinos, anything like that. So 71% of Americans consider that to be spam. Any sort of an email that would contain a virus or some other phishing scheme, 70% of Americans consider that to be spam. And we lawyers, of course, would say that email that violates anti-spamming regulations would qualify as spam. And then if we keep going, we see that any sort of email that falls into your spam or junk mail folder, 59% of Americans consider that to be spam. The unfortunate part about that definition is that it relies on your spam folder having appropriate settings. I personally have had my own emails to people end up in the spam folder, and it's me giving legal advice. I don't know if they're trying to tell me something with their spam settings there or not. But then some additional definitions of spam include email from sources that you can't unsubscribe from. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Email that you once requested but no longer want. And finally, jokes and silly messages that people continue to forward me even though I've asked them not to. And I did get this information from an infographic on Pinterest. I borrowed it from Visual Loop if you want to check it out further. But from a legal perspective, essentially all commercial email is regulated, whether it's what we would consider to be those bulk email spam or not. If it's a commercial email, you need to be aware of what the regulations are. And we have both federal and state law to consider. First of all, the Minnesota State Consumer Protection Statutes also address consumer email. And those statutes would look at electronic messages sent through an internet service provider's facilities located in this state to another resident of this state, especially if they're promoting real property, goods, or services. The problem with this definition is no one really knows if their internet service provider's facilities are here in Minnesota or not. So I'm going to basically talk today about both the federal and state rules and just look at it as best practices. You should try to always be in compliance with both. And the Federal Act looks at or regulates any sort of electronic mail message that's primarily for the purpose of commercial advertisement or promotion. We're going to be focusing a little bit more on that primary purpose piece. So there's a number of different types of emails. The first one would be a transactional or relationship type of an email. We're always going to be focusing on the content. So a transactional or relationship message is going to primarily focus on an existing relationship that you have with someone or a transaction that's already in process between the parties. So for example, it could confirm or facilitate a transaction. Maybe you're sending an invoice or a receipt. You might be giving warranty or recall information on a product. You're also going to be conveying information if maybe the terms or the delivery date has changed, that sort of a thing. Maybe giving an account update. Or finally, an email can actually be a way of delivering a product or a service. So I know people have purchased electronic products, maybe an ebook or something like that, and a link to where you can download that is often transmitted by email. Transactional and relationship emails are a little bit less regulated. Those are going to be subject only to the regulations prohibiting false or misleading messages. So there's going to be some additional regulations for emails that are considered to be primarily commercial. And primarily commercial emails focus on advertising or promoting a product or service of some sort. It also can be maybe you're promoting a website and you're sending out links that you want people to go and look back at your website to look at something. These types of emails are going to be subject to all of the regulations contained in the state and federal laws. So those will be a little bit more important for you to pay attention to what you're doing. So of course, what do you do if your email has multiple purposes? Because of course, sometimes we might send out emails to our customers or prospective customers that are talking about a sale, but we also want to highlight our next event or a next product that's going to be released soon, something like that. So the key here is to look at the primary purpose of the email. Is the primary purpose going to be commercial in nature, or is it relating to an existing transaction? And when you're in doubt, you should consider a couple factors. One, what is a reasonable recipient going to consider that message to be for when it's just looking at the subject line? Or second, whether the transactional information in the email is going to appear at the beginning or not. So for example, if you are leading with the sale information or a promotional idea, and then you just have a little snippet at the end talking about, following up on a purchase or something like that, that email is going to be considered largely promotional. However, if the lion's share of the email and the subject line of the email is focusing on an account update, like we've shipped your products, or your account balance is currently 30 days overdue, or something like that, that's going to be focusing on a transaction and focusing on the relationship. So let's start out with regulations that apply to all types of messages. And these things are basically general restrictions on being honest. You don't want, or no restrictions on being honest, it's restrictions on being dishonest. So of course, there's never a restriction on being honest. But of course we want to start out with, don't use any sort of false or misleading header information. And if you've ever gotten those spam emails that are talking about online gambling, or maybe you're getting one saying that there's a package ready for pickup from a courier service or something like that, if you click in and look at the header information, you're going to quickly see that the sender doesn't match who they're claiming to be. So it's important that your header information is accurate. You never want to use a third party's domain without their permission. This includes if you're routing an email through another service provider. You don't want to use their domain without their permission. And you definitely don't want to misrepresent any information about where the information is coming from. So I do occasionally have people who are sending emails out on behalf of other people, and we definitely want it to say in the header information that it's so-and-so sending an information or sending an email on behalf of whoever their client is that they're sending the message for. And finally, we don't want to use any sort of deceptive subject lines. I think this is pretty straightforward. You have to really know what you're doing to actually mess with any of this information other than the subject line. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing to actually be misleading with a header, use someone else's domain. So I'm going to assume that everyone listening today is not a hacker and is not capable of doing these things. So the most important thing for all of our listeners today is going to be, don't use any sort of a deceptive subject line. So let's look at an example. This is a spam message that showed up in my spam folder this morning. This one's kind of an easy one because obviously this subject line has already been noted as being spam. But if we look at who it's from, we'll see that it doesn't necessarily match. It says that it's from GMO News, but the email is some weird email address that doesn't correlate at all to GMO News. I don't even know who GMO News is, but regardless, that's a clue that this is a spam email. It's something you wouldn't want to click on the attachment, you wouldn't want to click on a link, anything like that. But this is what you don't want your emails to look like. You want the name of who it's from to match in some way the additional information in the header, who it's coming from. So that's something to keep an eye out. So just a good way to do this is when you're sending out an email campaign or something like that, you want to maybe send a test sample to yourself so you can check to make sure that this is accurate information. So let's look at the next type of email, and these would be the commercial, promotional, and advertising types of emails that are going to be subject to higher levels of regulation. There's certain things that you always want to do and certain kinds of things that you always don't want to do in these types of emails. First of all, you always want to tell them where you're physically located. It just gives a degree of trust to an email. If you can't tell where in the world this email is coming from or if it's from a legitimate company, your readers are not going to want to read it. So always include your physical address, and it should be a valid postal address just in case they want to reach you by mail. But one of the most important aspects of the federal and state rules are that you have to provide a way for people to get off of your mailing lists. And so the most common way of doing this nowadays is to have a link at the bottom of the email that says to unsubscribe, click here. There's also the Minnesota statute focuses on having a 1-800 number, which is a little bit outdated, but you don't have to do a 1-800 number, but it's an option. Or you can allow for a written request to be sent by snail mail asking to be removed from an email list, which is also incredibly old-fashioned and a little bit tedious for users. So the recommended way to do it is to have something at the bottom of your email. It needs to be a very simple process. It needs to be something as simple as replying to the email that says, please remove me from your list, or instructions that say, reply to this email and put unsubscribe in the subject line. Or there are a lot of companies that will manage your email list for you, and they sometimes will have an intermediate step where you click a link and then you go to an outside web page and you have to fill in exactly which lists you want to be removed from and that sort of a thing. That's acceptable as long as there's no more than one step. You can't go any further than one web page from the email without violating the law. So, and the most of them that I have seen follow this, but you just want to be careful, especially if you are using one of those email management services, that you're complying with this one-step rule. Of course, you can't charge a fee to remove someone from your list, and you can't ask for any sort of personal information other than the email address that they are requesting to be removed from the list. Another thing to keep in mind is that you need to be very timely in managing these subscription lists. So if you are using an outside system, or if you have an employee who you're tasking with managing your subscription list, you want to make sure that they are handling all requests within 30 days. And that's actually the outside edge. Really, you need to remove people from within 10 days of their request, and it's 10 business days. But sometimes there will be just an online system that will be managing your list for you, and you need to make sure that that system will work if someone replies to your email within 30 days. So let's say that I were to email out to my clients information on an event on today, September 17th. And some people might have it directed into a folder. They might not read it right away. But this restriction means that if they open it before October 17th and they click on my unsubscribe link at the bottom, that whatever system I have in place will continue to work up through October 17th, 30 days after I sent the email. So that's what the 30-day restriction is. But you always want to make sure that you are removing people from the list within 10 business days of receiving their requests. And of course, faster is better in this situation. When I got married a few years ago, I of course subscribed to all sorts of wedding blogs and online magazines and things like that. And I think there was one that I had to request to be removed 5 times, and I was getting really crabby every time I saw an email show up in my mailbox, because they would send something out like once a week. So the first 2, I could see, well, maybe they hadn't processed my email, my unsubscribe email right away. It's within 10 days, maybe they haven't gotten to it. But by the 5th email, we were well beyond this 10-day limit, and I was getting really annoyed with getting these wedding emails, especially after the wedding. You know, it's just really not as exciting to look at flowers anymore. So please keep in mind that 10-day rule. And another thing is that for these emails that are focused on advertising and promotion only, your subject needs to be clearly disclosed. So the Federal Act is actually, this is a situation where the Federal Act is a little bit more lenient than the State Act. The CAN-SPAM Act basically says that you need to at some point make it clear that this is an advertising and promotional email. The Minnesota law is a little bit more strict here, and they say that they want the first 3 letters of the subject line of your email to be ADV, short for advertising, of course. But then they provide some exclusions. And when we look at these exclusions, we see that this is where they are excluding those sorts of business and transactional relationships that we talked about earlier. So you don't have to include this ADV notation in the subject line for anyone who has consented to receive an email. This includes people who have signed up and subscribed to your list. This also applies to emails that are being sent out just to members of an organization or to basically inter-office employee types of emails. Or finally, the business and transactional relationship we talked about earlier. But you actually see very few emails with these ADV notations. So this is something that I think people are really missing. So that's why it's so important to pay attention to the types of people you're sending your email to. This actually might be a good time to talk a little bit about where your email lists are coming from. And I know BizzyWeb either has done a seminar on this or has one scheduled. Yep. But you really can technically include anyone on your email list. There's not necessarily anything wrong with buying a list of emails from someone else and adding them to your email campaigns. But what I would recommend doing is make sure that you are keeping track of where each and every email has come from. You want to form different lists for your clients. I recommend having one list for your clients and customers, one list for people who have subscribed to your list and have actually opted in, so to speak, to receive your emails, and then a third list for everybody else who doesn't necessarily fit these other categories, because it's that third list that is going to need the extra special treatment from you. It's that third list that's going to need to have these ADV letters included at the beginning of your subject line every time. So let's talk about penalties, because I know a lot of people figure, oh, I can just add everyone to my email list. Or I personally have gone to networking events and I've handed out my card or left a pile of cards on the table and had people pick them up without even talking with me, and then all of a sudden I'm getting all of their emails. So what's a penalty for violating these statutes? And basically the fines look at each email message. So, and they are calculated based on recipient. So for me, I could receive $10 to $25 from you for spamming me for each message. And the $10 to $25 range depends on exactly what your violation was. But that could be up to $35,000 a day. So, and this is another situation where the state law is more strict. So here in Minnesota, we need to be extra cautious about what you're doing. But the other thing that is a little bit more important is that you need to be aware of service providers. Recipients are not the only people who can sue you for spamming them, but service providers. If you are using a service provider to send out spam messages to a whole library of people, they also can sue you, and that will be a per message penalty as well. So you might think, well, I'm only sending out one email per day to a person, so I'm not going to be really dealing with that much of a financial risk. But it's the service provider who could really come after you and say, hey, we've noticed you're sending this large volume of email to people. We're getting complaints. They're clicking spam. We're getting notice. And that's where you're going to end up getting into trouble. And that's where the financial penalties could be larger. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the laws also allow for recovery of attorney's fees and court costs. So that's just an extra kicker for you if you end up sending out a spam message, is that it can be extra costly for you.
Wow.
So, and another thing to keep in mind is people don't usually think that email is really that harmful, so they don't always think that there can be additional penalties, but the federal statute does provide for criminal penalties, and it depends really how bad your violation is. But the more egregious your violation, the more risk you have of a criminal penalty. But you can have these criminal penalties, which would include additional monetary fines or imprisonment if it's bad enough. But things that you want to avoid any sort of criminal arrest would be accessing someone's computer without their permission, using some sort of virus to harvest email addresses from their computer, or using some sort of a virus that will use their computer to send out an email so it looks like it's from them. I mean, we've all received those things that look like it's from our Aunt Sally, sending out pictures of something or other, and then you open it up and find out it's really not from her. She's been a victim of an attack. So you don't want to do anything like that. And actually the final one on this list is actually the one that's probably going to be most risky for the average business owner. Again, I'm going to assume that no one listening today is using any sort of a virus to harvest email addresses. But there are some programs you can use to actually generate email addresses. There are programs you can use that will generate smith1@gmail.com, smith2@gmail.com, and things like that. So they end up generating this long list of potential emails that then they can sell or that you can buy. And if you use a program like that, that violates the federal statute. So be wary of that. Another thing that I didn't touch on today that I should quickly is that there are also some additional rules for sexually explicit emails. I'm making the assumption that no one here today is selling pornography or any sort of other sexually related products. But keep in mind, if that's the type of business you're in and you are selling some sort of toys or anything like that, that you have some additional email regulations to keep in mind. And also the penalties, of course, can be more strict for violating the rules regarding those types of emails. And one final thing I want to warn everybody about, be aware of contractors. So if you do hire someone to be managing your email for you, whether it's an online program that you use to send out your email campaigns, or maybe it's actually a marketing company who's going to be writing a newsletter for you and sending it out once a month or once a week, whatever, you need to be monitoring them, because not only can they be held liable for what they're doing, but so can you. And the law specifically states that you cannot protect yourself through terms of a contract. So even if you were to hire a wonderful lawyer to draft a contract between you and that marketing company who's going to be doing your email campaigns, even if a lawyer like me were to put in a provision that says you're not liable if they do something wrong, basically the statute says that that contract is invalid and you're still personally responsible. So the moral of the story, monitor whoever you hire to work on your email marketing for you, because both of you could end up being held liable for it. And as we talked about, the penalties can be substantial. So since we have a few minutes left, I thought I might run through some examples just to help us kind of identify what things we need to keep in mind when we're putting together an email.
And we do have a bunch of questions, Erin. So
we do? Okay.
I'll let you kick through the examples, and then we do have a bunch, and there are a bunch of folks that are watching too. So as a reminder, there are a number of questions, and I'm seeing some folks that are +1ing the questions that Jen has posted through the sales box or that she's received. But make sure that you're entering those questions, because this is your time, and we want to make sure that you're hitting all of the big questions that you have. You know, 10, 25 bucks a pop, 35 grand a day, plus court costs and all that stuff. There's a lot at stake here to make sure that you're doing this right. So this is your chance to ask a real professional, a wonderful person to answer your questions. So Erin, thank you.
All right, well, I will try to go through these quickly so we have time for questions. These first two examples are designed to help us decide what type of an email we have, so we know which set of regulations we need to be following. So in message A on the left, basically, the message is to Jane Smith. The subject line says your account statement, and then it's talking about how we shipped your order of 25,000 widgets to this warehouse. It shipped on June 1st. If you have questions, please call our customer service office. We must receive your payment by June 30th, otherwise you'll be charged a late fee. If you have any questions, it's who to contact. And then at the very end they say, visit our website for our exciting new line of mini widgets. So people here in the room, would you consider this to be a transactional type of email or a commercial promotion type of email?
Definitely transactional.
This one's pretty obvious. Thanks for chiming in, everybody. Because the lion's share of the agreement or of the email is talking about the recent sale and the terms of that sale, with, of course, just a reminder at the end to look at the website. So then message B, again, it's to Jane Smith, and again, the subject line says your account statement, but the body of the email is a little bit different. The body says we're offering widgets in all sorts of styles and colors at great discounts. Visit our website. We also have this sizzling summer special if you order by the end of the month. But you know, we won't be undersold. We'll match anybody else's bids. Blah blah blah. And then at the end it says, oh, by the way, your order's been filled and it'll be delivered on Friday. So
advertising.
Thank you, Jen. So this one, of course, even though the subject line was still relating to your account, and there is a little sentence at the end regarding your order, the lion's share of the email is focused on promotion, and also the promotion is basically the lead-in of the email. It's the beginning. And so in this situation, it would be looked at like a promotional email. So that's when you would need to be more careful with the subject line and who you're sending this type of a message to. And then one more example. This is another one from my mailbox this morning. But this came from someone I don't know. I've never met her. The subject line says that she has a question about my website, but when you actually read the email, she's trying to set up a phone call with me to talk about how I could improve my website, how I could drive traffic, get some conversion and leads, that sort of a thing. So this is an unsolicited email. I don't know anything about her. One could say that the subject line is not necessarily accurate as to what the email is about, so that's a potential violation of the regulations. This is going to get a little bit nitpicky on the rules, but if we look at the bottom, we see that it says she's from California, so she wouldn't be subject to the Minnesota rules. But if she was here in Minnesota, this is one that she should have started with ADV at the beginning of the subject line. So that's something to keep in mind. If I knew Rachel, I would let her know this. If this turned into a repeat thing, I would want to make sure that there was an unsubscribe link at the bottom. There's nothing. I kind of cut off the bottom of the email first based on the side here, but there wasn't an unsubscribe link, so it should have one. But this is just an example of how someone just trying to solicit business and make a sale made some very simple mistakes that violate the rules. So let's talk about some questions.
Awesome, and thank you, Erin, for providing that detail. As we get into this, there's a number of them, and I do want to swap just for a second to remind folks how to submit those questions. If you go in and if you're on the webinar, you can ask the questions and you can see what's available. I'm going to mute this so that you don't see me, but you can see what's in here. So if you purchase a list, so we've got all these questions. So you just click Ask a New Question, and we can log them in. Jen, thank you for handling these. These are the ones that that we received either in advance or at the sales box. So, and I know we do have some questions in the room as well. So we'll get to all of those. This is your time, though. So for the number of folks that are on the Hangout, I would encourage you to please take that time right now and make sure that you are representing yourself and getting the answers to the questions that you need. I'm just going to skip and keep this right here so that we've got Erin's details while we're answering our questions. And Erin, if you need me to direct over to a different space, let me know. Question number 1, when sending a newsletter, which may talk about a promotion, articles, and events all in one, and it all links to your website for more details, is that spam? So if your email is a newsletter that talks all about all kinds of different stuff, is that spam?
And this question actually was from me. So,
oh, good.
And the reason being that we actually tell our clients to do this because a lot of times in email you get a very short amount of time to get somebody's attention, right? So maybe you have a longer blog article that you're trying to give more information to, and the link says find out more, find out how, register today, and so, my question, not wanting to tell our people to spam people.
Well, newsletters are great. Am I trying to get on the screen here? Okay. So I think e-newsletters are a great way to market. The professionals like you guys tell me that you get more bang for your buck and more return for an e-newsletter. But it's really more a matter of who it's going to and what rules will apply. So if you were to send that newsletter to your existing clients and your client list, you would have a business relationship with all of them. And so then you wouldn't need to have any sort of special label on that type of an email. If you have that newsletter that's going to a list of people who have signed up on your website or through Facebook or whatever requesting your email, they also have opted in, so you don't necessarily have to identify that with the ADV. It's okay to send it. But if you have a third list of people that are that maybe are just people from, you're located here in Champlin, if there's a Champlin business that you would love to work with, and so you want to start letting them know all of your great deals and all of your promotions, that type of a person should go on a third list, because for them this would be considered an unsolicited email. So you need to be more careful with those types of people, and you'd want it to be clear that this was an advertising email. For Minnesota companies, you'd want it to start with the ADV notation, that sort of a thing.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you, Erin. Let's skip ahead, and I'm actually going to stop screen sharing for a moment so you don't have to watch me do this. It's question 2. Oh, I need to click done. Deceptive subject lines. Sending out an email that says September newsletter can be boring and may not get opened. If you say get 40% off today, it gets opened more, is that okay?
It is okay. If if you are promoting a 40% off deal that someone can actually get if they follow through and do whatever it says in the email, it's absolutely okay to do that. It's not deceptive. So that's acceptable. And of course, you have to walk that fine line between coming up with a subject line that will get opened, but just not violate any sort of rules. So if you were to say something like win a free pony, if you're not really offering a pony, then that would be a deceptive subject line.
And I know a number of folks that would definitely click on that message, including my daughter. So awesome. Okay. So let's see here. Next up, let's just click done on that one. And if you purchase a list, what happens if you get marked as spam?
Well, that's something that happens a little bit more behind the scenes from what I normally run into from a legal side. But I believe if you get marked as spam too often, you're going to be flagged with a service provider. And so that's...
I can probably help out a little bit on that one too. So generally what will happen if you get flagged as spam is you'll essentially get a ding against you by the ISP. And if you get enough of those dings, then two things could happen. Either your IP address will get blocked by that ISP, or you'll get added to a blacklist that may get shared among other ISPs to bring that kind of more in line. So that's one of the biggest reasons actually to use a service like Constant Contact, because Constant Contact has its own list of IP addresses. Those IP addresses are vetted very carefully, and they make sure that all of the emails that are sent out adhere to very strict guidelines, so you're much less likely to get marked as being a spammer. And they just take actions, and they proactively engage ISPs so that if you see a list against, or if you see a ding against that particular email, that's not going to go against you and your website, because it can actually hurt your search engine optimization on your website if you get listed as a spammer as well. So you don't want that to happen. And anytime you click junk or spam on your email account, that's actually sending a note to your ISP that you found that message to be spam. So if you really hate those people, go ahead and click them. But I would ask, of course, to never click spam on any BizzyWeb emails, because that would be terrible. So hopefully that helps as a layer on top of that. Next question: does it help to work with an email provider, for example, Constant Contact, to manage your email to ensure that the unsubscribes are handled appropriately? And I guess I can probably take that question as well. The answer is, of course, it helps if you work with a company that's built to handle email marketing. The two things that you don't want to do are send emails yourself to hundreds of people and or go this alone. There are so many ways that you could go wrong inside of sending this out. We said, that person that was sending that website questions message, yeah, they're pretty much legal. It's not great, but it's illegal in Minnesota. If they were sending from Minnesota, you'd be in trouble. So the best way to handle that and skirt around the issue so that you're being careful is to work with a company that actually does all this stuff automatically. Constant Contact in particular has great IP address blocks that are much less likely to be seen as spam and therefore automatically filtered out. So if you want to make sure that your messages actually get seen, making sure that you use an email marketing tool like Constant Contact would be, for me, an absolute no-brainer. And it doesn't really matter as long as you're using some tool. There are other ones out there like MailChimp or MailerMailer or any of the other ones. Everything else but Constant Contact we don't really like as much. But for Constant Contact in particular, it makes it easy. The unsubscribe button is automatically in there, and they actually give you training and tips on how to make an effective email and how to send an effective note. So the more you can work with professional tools or professional people, the more likely you are to get seen. And it's the simple difference between, are you sending out an email that says March newsletter? Or are you sending out an email that says, we need 3 hammers for tomorrow's event. That's actually going to get you the result that you're looking for. Marked newsletter, people are more likely to just either can it or mark it as spam, or they're like, I don't care what your newsletter is. So, that's something that a professional person or professional group and or tool can get you that you can't do any other way. Just don't go it alone.
Great tips.
Next up, what about when you try to unsubscribe from an email, but the company who sent its website isn't taking your request? Just like you mentioned, the button doesn't work. How do you report that company, or should you report that company? What should you do?
Well, it's up to you, and really it comes down to how annoyed are you, I suppose. I think if it's someone you know and you're just trying to get off of their list, you probably have another email contact for them. You could just send them an email directly and say, hey, I want to get off of your list. The next step would be to dial it up a notch and say, hey, you're spamming me. According to this awesome lawyer I know, you're violating the anti-spam rules, so remove me now or else. Or, as you described already, if you click spam or junk through your email handling software, that's going to report back to the service provider. So that will actually ding them, and eventually they'll get the clue, I would think.
Right.
So I would handle it differently based on if it's someone I knew or if it's someone like some of the examples I gave that I've never met before.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. I have a great question from Tyler Pieper. Tyler, thanks for posting in and thanks for joining us. Tyler writes, if I am sending out a newsletter to business relations and clients, I know that it's not spam. But what happens with the legality of the piece if it's forwarded to contacts of my business relation or client with whom I have no contact? So if it's forwarded on by somebody, what happens?
Well, in that situation, that's obviously it's out of your control. And of course, you want people to forward your newsletters and your promotions and that sort of thing to other people. So if you can, in that situation, worst case scenario, if you were accused of spamming them, you would just have to kind of trace the trail and say, hey, there was an intermediate person, we're not affiliated with them, we didn't know they did this, we didn't have control over them, we didn't order them to do it, and so you'd have a defense.
And actually with Constant Contact in particular, there's a share button, and that share button makes sure that it mentions who is referring the email. It still comes from you, but it says, note, you are receiving this email because Tyler recommended it. If you'd like to unsubscribe, here's that button. So it actually makes it much more prominent on this is a note that's been shared because someone in your contact lists, and it lists that someone thought it would be interesting to you. So that's much less likely to be an issue. And certainly if somebody just forwards an email on, you're not going to get dinged for spam because, why would I mark Tyler's note as being spam?
Exactly.
And then essentially you're dinging the person that sent the email and not you.
Right.
So, the key thing inside of that is make sure you're asking, or make sure you're writing smart content that isn't spam, and you won't have to worry about it anyway. So awesome, Tyler. Thank you very much. If you have a follow-up question on that, we'd love to hear it. But that was awesome. So thank you very much. Jen has another note in here for us. Handling opt-out requests within 30 days is understandable, but what about retail locations that say it'll take up to 6 weeks? So like, if I'm going into Home Depot and I sign up, throw my card in, there's a little fine print at the bottom that says that requests may take up to 6 weeks to happen. Can that be an issue?
I suppose that it could. I think that for the average user, I think if they are told up front, this is how long it's going to take due to our internal process, if you fit within your process, the recipients of those emails are probably not going to complain or spam you because you will have given them notice. Is it a violation of the law? Possibly, technically, but it's one of those things where you kind of have to balance your internal process and what you can handle with just giving notice to people. And the average person is going to be understanding of that, especially if they're dealing with a large company with multiple retail locations where possibly the individual retail location is not managing the email list. I assume that in that situation they have to forward it to corporate, and it understandably could take a little bit longer.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all the questions that I have. Again, would encourage anyone else to ask any questions. I do have one follow-up because I know that there's one that everyone's probably thinking in the back of their head, especially after hearing about canned spam. First, two-parter, very short. What the heck is canned spam? And second, what is the likelihood that I could actually get dinged $35,000 a day and wind up tinking my tin cup on some bars at the end of next week?
Great follow-up questions, Dave. And I actually was wondering that too, because as I was telling my friends and contacts that I was doing this today, I said, I'm talking about canned spam, but it's actually talking about how you shouldn't spam. So canned spam stands for controlling the assault of non-solicited pornography and marketing. So controlling the assault of non-solicited pornography and marketing, and that shortens down to canned spam. But realistically, and I know that as business owners we kind of have to weigh the realistic risks with the potential benefits of an email campaign. The thing to keep in mind is that the statutes don't allow for class action by individual email recipients. So any single user who is receiving a spam message from you, they're not going to be able to receive the $35,000 a day from you, because the number of emails at $15 to $25 a pop, you're not sending that many emails to a single user. So that's not the type of thing you really have to worry about. I think more concerning to the average business owner is the negative reputation they will get among potential clients. I think that's probably more of a concern than the $35 a day financial penalty. The thing that is more of a problem for the average business owner is the internet service providers. If they are receiving the notifications from various users that they consider your messages to be spam, they can collect those together and say, hey, you're using our internet service to send out these spam messages, and then they can say it's this many messages a day, we're going to charge you per pop up to $35,000 a day. So that's where it gets to be a much bigger deal. But realistically, I mean, you need to look at your list and do the math, but $35,000 a day with the potential penalty would be, a certain number. It would be a very large, I haven't done the math. I probably should have before today, but I didn't do the math on how many messages you'd have to send to actually get to that maximum. And then you have to consider how many people are actually complaining out of the people you're sending them to. Right. So I like to give the statistics so that people realize it is a serious law. It does have some teeth. But for the actual business owner, unless you're just spamming a bunch of people or you are doing some of those more fraudulent things like using a virus to cultivate email addresses, you're probably not going to run into a financial penalty.
Yeah, it's just not that likely, but I think the blacklisting issue is much more likely. If you
Absolutely.
buy a list and you send to that group, or even if you have a large organization, I mean, BizzyWeb has had clients in the past that we've had to get off of blacklists from things that they did before they were working with us, of course.
Of course.
But it's a big deal, and if all of a sudden none of your emails get through, that can have a negative impact, a huge negative impact on your client base and just on helping you grow your business. So you got to be smart about this stuff is the big thing. So even if you're not going to get nicked by the Canned Spam Act, don't spam people because it's not good business practice. So Steve, I know you had a couple of questions and I want to definitely make sure. Do you want to have those online or offline?
Probably offline.
Okay. Well, in that case, let me just skip over for one last second to close out the presentation. If you do have any questions and you're watching online, now is your chance to get them in last second because we will answer those. But if not, send us a note and we'll connect you directly with Erin to have her handle your questions. In wrap, BizzyWeb, of course, does web design and hosting, and we do both of those things brilliantly. Included in that is helping you with spam issues, making sure you don't get hacked so that things don't happen, getting you off of blacklists if you are in that. So if you're not hosting with us, especially if you're on WordPress-powered websites, you should be talking to us because otherwise you're just not smart. And finally, online marketing. This is something that BizzyWeb does that's new that includes email marketing. So whether you're trying to grow business leads for your business, to deepen relationships with your clients, enhance your promotions, or just rank better on the web, we can help you with a entire suite designed to get you the results that you're looking for. be sure to join us every Wednesday. And next Wednesday, we're actually talking about text messaging. I forgot to update this slide, so my apologies to the marketing team. Don't ding me for that later.
Yep.
But text messaging is what we're going to talk about next week with Nikki Norton of Norton Business Solutions. And make sure to fill out a Buzz report if you would like to do so. We'll look at your online marketing, look at your email marketing, and help you figure out what you can do to get even better results and give you a path to that success. So thanks very much for joining us. Again, I am Dave Meyer with BizzyWeb, and thank you to Erin Swanson of ES Swanson Law. If you haven't connected with Erin, again, I will hit a quick escape on this and go over to Erin's deck. And so when I do that, this is how you can get a hold of Erin. If you go to erin@swansonlawmn.com, don't add her to any spam lists. But go ahead and tweet her, Facebook her, or give her a call at 612-564-5292. Erin is, again, very brilliant and our trusted advisor. So if you need someone, please get a hold of Erin. Thank you very much, Erin, and have a fantastic afternoon, everyone. Remember, at BizzyWeb, we help you generate buzz without getting stung. Have a great day.
Thanks.